Hey there, YouTube. In this video, I want to talk about some things going down in our country, along with some of my primary worries regarding the things dominating our media. Things like the upcoming presidential election, plots against the government, groups like the Proud Boys and the NFAC, potential future violence, and the state of the American identity. Now, I know this is a bit late given the timing of events, but I wanted to at least give my thoughts regarding these things before the election day. If you have your own thoughts and comments regarding your own worries, predictions, or just some general thoughts you want to share, please comment below and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Something that has suffered in recent years with the election of Donald Trump is the American identity and what America should look like. To say the divide between liberal progressives and conservatives has grown in recent years is an understatement. What it means to be American and be free and be a free people has become a matter of political opinion. How the federal government should govern its people has been equated to the difference between preserving and destroying the Union. Then there are the racial issues that persist to this day. Conservatives and liberals on each side have different views on the state of racism and the discrimination in this country, with opinions ranging from extinct to prominent in all of America's systems, including the justice system. And then there's the politics and the economy itself. The gap between the ideologies of the Democrats and the Republicans continue to grow, becoming more and more polarizing, with Congress becoming nothing more than a gridlock shouting match. I'm beginning to think we're more divided than united. I'm concerned that, as this continues, being American will just be a thing of the past, and the population will be divided based on their political leanings and ideologies. And for those like me who stand neutral and critical of both the right and the left will be forced into choosing a side, especially if a civil conflict arose. So it's no secret that this presidential race has been one of the most heated, since many people see this as the ultimate showdown between liberals and conservatives in the battle for the future of our nation. We've seen vicious verbal exchanges by both Donald Trump and Joe Biden and other elected officials who support these candidates. We've seen this on live television and on the streets. While this may not exactly be anything new, this particular election has been marred by violence and unrest in the country due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the recent racial tensions. In addition, the election itself has been attacked hard by Donald Trump and his base, who have consistently teased that they wouldn't accept the election results if he loses. The reason being due to the belief that the system itself is rigged and rife with fraud. Contrary to what the GOP says, a number of his supporters seem to back up his remarks here, as they tend to echo his sentiments. And we're seeing this sentiment grow. On the other hand, many Biden supporters and those on the left have accused the right of trying to undermine the democratic system of this country. They have also accused the right of encouraging social inequality, less gun control, and being party to systemic racism. Other accusations include encouraging militia groups to threaten Democratic leaders and officials. This has caused a bit of a polarized atmosphere where people are stuck between a war of words and threats of conflict by both sides. While I have my concerns about what will happen if Biden loses the election, I'm more concerned about what will happen if Trump loses the election. The reason being because I think the immediate effects will likely affect us all, not just a few. I'm genuinely concerned that the president may not accept the election results and may even try to rally his supporters to back his cause. And with the backing of these groups and those within the administration, we could find ourselves in a serious situation should this type of crisis erupt. Militias and extremist groups on both the right and the left could begin planning assassinations and overthrows of state governments. Protests could erupt, with armed groups on both sides of the political spectrum coming out to either defend the protesters or deter them, leading to clashes with members on the opposite side. And with the federal government locked in a constitutional crisis, people not sure who's in charge, who knows what will happen then. And that brings me to the issue of militias and other armed groups in America. I know this is very controversial, especially among preppers. That being said, over the past few months, we've seen militias come to cities with violent protests going down, attempting to, quote-unquote, protect private property when they weren't invited or asked. This seems to be out of some apparent duty to protect the community from a perceived threat or to their community and the way of life. While there's a lot of truth to that, this carries with it the risk of escalation and violent encounters. Far-right militias aren't the only armed organizations in this country. Far-left militias like the NFAC or the Not Effing Around Coalition have also come to protest and have held demonstrations. So there is armed organizations on both sides, and both are ready to fight. Which brings me to my biggest concern here with these militias. I'm worried that there will be a point where these militias will grow bolder and start ignoring law enforcement and actually taking the law into their own hands. Many leaders of these far-right groups have expressed their disappointment with their local and state government's responses to the civil unrest in the country, and have expressed their desires to do the job of the police for them since they won't. In a similar way, leaders of the left-wing NFAC have expressed anger over the perceived aggression by both the right-wing militias and law enforcement against black communities. What I fear is that we may end up seeing a scenario where unrest from a botched election may compel these militias, primarily on the right of the political spectrum, to come out and enforce law and order, attempting to quell unrest, posing a danger not only to themselves, but other civilians. In retaliation, I can see the left-leaning militias come out in their defense, resulting in clashes erupting, along with shootings and assassinations. Taking this a step further, if we find ourselves in a scenario where Trump doesn't want to leave office, will that encourage these militias to mobilize and begin urging state officials to secede? If that fails, will we see militias begin cordoning off areas and declaring them to be autonomous zones or their own states? Or, as we've seen with the extremist plot to overthrow the Michigan state government, would it be too far-fetched to see more anti-government militias and organizations with members from both the right and the left attempting to do more than just target governors? What if they start targeting congressmen who disagree with them? In general, we could see increases in domestic terrorism and the disintegration of law and order. My final concern is the future of this country. I've said things along these lines in my last video, but I feel that when it comes to the question of whether we will see a civil war in the near future, it's just about inevitable. Too many people will rather fight than solve problems. With a Congress that is too gridlocked to pass effective laws such as relief bills and police and justice reforms, the people are feeling more isolated and the victims of a failed response, not only to Corona, but also to the social injustices of recent. The government has failed to respond to the unrest in a proper way, causing more anger and frustration. Members of the left blame the right, and the right blames the left. And due to this failure, now militias are taking it upon themselves to be the police. And the leaders elected to serve the American people are now more concerned about serving their voters than the American people. And the election process itself is coming under threat. On the international scene, the United States has mounting debt, has an economy trying to recover from the crash earlier this year, and is seeing growing tensions with China, Russia, and North Korea. New technologies allowing militaries to strike each other with hypersonic weapons are being developed, putting an extra strain on the Defense Department to catch up and stay ahead. Our allies are beginning to reconsider their need for American friendship due to the policies of Donald Trump, further isolating the United States. In short, our country is going to crap along with our reputation. And with George Floyd, countries see the United States as a hypocrite when it comes to human rights, making some question the moral authority America has on the subject of liberty and equality. I think this doesn't bode well for the future of America. COVID really helped me see how selfish the American people are, not just when it comes to their liberties, but also their concern for their fellow man. And with politics mucking up the response to the pandemic, I wonder what will happen if a more dangerous virus appears, or some other crisis arises. If we can't solve COVID, how can we handle something more dangerous, something more pressing? And what about our system? What if this rhetoric about fraud in our election and foreign interference causes people to lose faith in the system during election? This list goes on, honestly. I don't have confidence that the United States will be united enough to handle these situations. And honestly, that's not a comforting feeling. I personally feel that the United States is declining and is following the trend of many powerful nations throughout history, especially nations built by wars. If this election goes on without issue and a peaceful transition of power is achieved, who's to say this won't set a precedent? Who's to say the rhetoric will one day come back to bite us? Who's to say eventually a single event will push us to civil war? And then the question comes up, what will happen once we're in that position? As for preppers, how can one prepare for that? I mean, truly. Anyway, those are my thoughts regarding the election and its aftermath. This is the Clear and Present Prepper signing out.